Welcome everyone to another episode of Unlearning the Falsehoods. So far, what I've managed to gather from my experiences is there are broadly two kinds of people. First, they will exercise their faculty of reason for the betterment of their spirituality. As in anything that they do, anything that they come across, they will analyze it with they will analyze it with their faculty of reason, but the end goal to which they're using the means of they're using the means of their faculty of reason would be spirituality. Okay, and there are other kinds of people who will exercise their faculty of reason to uh, they will apply their faculty of reason to the betterment of their nation, meaning they will whatever information that they come across or whatever the action that do, they will rationalize it based on what will be the outcome be, and the outcome has to inevitably be in the betterment of the nation. Okay, now again the definition of nation has been corrupted. We uh, we have we have adopted the definition of nation from the Western political theories and theology, and their understanding of nation is based on Christianhood. So again, there are too many layers to be uncovered, too many biases to be shattered, but largely, I would urge you to exercise your faculty of reason to uncover the falsehoods in our history. Okay, whatever piece of information you come across from this point forwards, always exercise your faculty of reason. Does it make sense to you? Okay, because usually what happens is, and largely in the case of history, history is shaped but largely by a lot of parallel events that are going on, especially for Bharat, because since we were a colony, okay, since we were a colony, so our political actions were inevitably aligned with the British. So whatever they did, it was assumed that we also did. Okay, and to this very day, not much has changed. Okay, to this very day we still pander to the Western world and look up to them and seek their validation on most of the issues, but that is again besides the point. um, Today what we are going to focus on in this episode is some of the events. Okay, there were many events that happened while Gandhi was here, while Khilafat movement was going on, and it was those events that shaped the actions of the people in our country, the political actions of the people in our country. Okay, so what had happened was there was a Crimean War in 1854 to 56. Okay, we ended the previous video of talking about the Crimean War. So when there was a Crimean War, so just to refresh your memory, Crimea is the territory which Russia overtook in 2014. Okay, so back in 1854 there was a Crimean War, and in that war, okay, the British, the French, and the Ottoman Empire were allies in fighting against Russia. So that would give you some background about why exactly is the West against Russian, takeover of Crimean Peninsula. It isn't something that started very recently. This war has been going on since centuries, at least 2 centuries, I would say. So there was a Crimean War, and the French, the British, and the Ottoman Empire fought together to defeat the Russians. Now, it is said that there were some closed door meetings between the British and the Ottoman caliphs. Okay, so in a way, they sought some kind of some kind of an acknowledgement by the Ottoman caliphs that the British were going to take over Bharat as a colony. Okay, because there was this um, I would say they were under this assumption that it was the Islamic rule that was something that they displaced when the British took over. Okay, we can sit and argue about was it really the Muslims that the British displaced, or was it really the Marathas that the British displaced? We can sit and argue about it, and overwhelmingly larger part of the scholarship, the indigenous or the native scholarship, agrees that it was indeed the Marathas and the Maratha supremacy that the British displaced when they took over Bharat. But that is besides the point. Here we are talking about the British. Okay, now the British, they had these closed door meetings with the caliphs in Turkey because now they are allies. So you'll also see that from 57 onwards, the control of the East India Company had passed on to the Westminster Parliament. So they were going to legislate on things that were previously under the prerogative of the East India Company and their employees. So the orders were now going to come from Westminster, from UK. Simply the authorities in Bharat, they will simply just execute those orders. All right. So now that the control, now they had some tacit agreement, the Ottoman caliphs and the British. Okay. So from 1857 onwards, um, begins this mutual camaraderie between the cross and the crescent, meaning between the Christians and the Muslims. Okay, because in a way they were both the people of the book. Even to this day, if you look at the public discourse and the political discourse of UK, okay, there you'll see largely people debating about how Islam accommodates many of the prophets in Christianity and whatnot. So there is some sort of a camaraderie, and from 1857 onwards, it started that this is a colony and we are willing to share. The Muslims, as in the Ottoman Caliph, was of the opinion that yes, we are willing to share. So that is how, okay, the transfer of power from the Mughal throne to the British in 1857 took place without the acknowledgement, without the permission, without the contribution of, or without the involvement of majority of the pagans of Bharat, because up until 1857 majority population of Bharat still was pagan. Okay, so the rule transferred, okay, the authority was transferred without involving majority of the population. The same thing, the same tradition will continue up until 1947, when there was again a transfer of power with partition, again without the involvement of the pagan natives. These things continue and these things tend to repeat. Okay, all right. Now what happened was, from 1857 onwards, up until the Balkan Wars, and right up to the end of the First World War. Okay, the Muslims, they were under the impression that the Christian colonizer, that was the British, they were their allies. They were the people of the book, and hence it makes sense to shake hands with them. So up until the end of the First World War, they were unflinching in their loyalty towards the British. In fact, many of the sessions of the Muslim League document their support for the support and loyalty towards the British Crown. Okay, because what happened was they did not need moderates to further their political gains. Okay, you'll have to understand this. Along with the British and along with the political model of the British, they have brought in this dirty game of politics into Bharat, meaning that you'll have to organize yourself into one union, one community, one party, and you'll have to fight for those rights. So what happened was, so they brought in this model of parliamentary democracy that that again is faulty, but as the popular discourse goes, that it is the least faulty, which is again arguable. That is but a point for another video. Right now I wanted to focus on, they brought along with them this model of political democracy, and along with it comes this wide range of political maneuvers, meaning aligning with other political parties, which will help you in your ascent to power. Okay, so after the First World War, what happened, there was this mistrust that the Muslims had with the British, and quite evidently it was again their actions that had led the Muslims to think that the British could not be trusted. Okay, parallelly what was going on was, okay, there was this society that was set up in Delhi, and that society that goes by the name of Anjuman. In May 1913, a society of Anjuman was set up in Delhi. Okay, now you'll have to understand that the only seat of Muslim power according to Muslims was Turkey. meaning that it was the caliph who occupies the seat of the Ottoman emperor. That caliph is supposed to be the spiritual and the temporal head of the Muslims. Okay, so anything other than that, okay, anything other than that cannot claim to justly rule over at least the Muslims. All right. Now, what happened after First World War? The British, along with French and Italy, had defeated many of the Islamic nations, including Turkey. Okay. When it came to negotiating peace treaties, what had happened? The peace treaties were harsh. Now, the mere thought that the places of worship of Islam were going to fall into the hands of non-Muslim, meaning the Britishers, that gave them the chills. Okay, up until now they were very happy with the way things were going, and they were very happy putting their faith on British, that they will rule justly. But after the First World War, they were awakened to the fact that even though they were the people of the book, okay, this element of competition between the people of the book, it still remains, and to this very day it still remains. Okay, both the people of the book, there is again an internal competition amongst them to win more and more converts to their side. So for a while, Muslims may have forgotten that, but they were rudely awakened by that after the First World War. Okay, they were simply not just fighting the pagans in Bharat; they were also fighting the Christians. Okay, who in turn were also converting in the pagans in Bharat. Okay, so now what it had created was, it had created a need. Okay, it had created a need for Muslims to get some indigenous support. Okay, established a more concrete base camp in Bharat. Okay, so they would not have to depend on British every time. If their interests were at risk or their interests were in danger, they would not have to depend at the mercy of the British. So they needed something more concrete. Okay, so they set up a society called Anjuman in Delhi in the year of 1913. Okay, what it advocated was, okay, firmly rooting their locus of identity with Turkey. Okay, any rule that the government of Bharat, that is the British, that they make in Bharat, they are not bound by those laws. They are only bound by the laws that were made by the caliph in Turkey. Even the Friday prayers that they have, okay, those Friday prayers had the name of the caliph in that. I guess they call it khutbah, I'm not really sure, but that is something that they do. They pray in the name of the ruler, and that prayer was done in the name of the caliph that was seated on the Ottoman throne in Turkey. Okay, so this shifted their entire locus of identity over there. Now they wanted some firm rooting over here, so they set up this establishment. Now we've also talked about how the Muslims, under the leadership of Sayyid Ahmad Khan, they adopted this idea of English education but with an Islamic filter, meaning we'll absorb what we can, but we will filter out things that takes us away from our book. All right, so there were two sections in their population. Number one was, on one side there were people who had adopted English language education but with some filters. Okay, they were adopting those English principles, but inevitably they were going to use those political tools to further their own political gains. Whereas on the other side there were people who remained traditional and to the roots. Okay, they completely neglected English education, they completely neglected English ways, and on top of that, they were convinced by the Wahhabi and the Deobandi ideology of completely getting rid of the cultural traditions of Bharat. Okay, so they were going more towards the pristine form of Islam, as the way Prophet practiced it. And on the other end, there were Muslims who had adopted English language education but with some filters. Now what this society Anjuman did was, it brought them together. Okay, so there was going to be some sort of unity. Okay, the support or the grounding that they were seeking, being miffed with the British and having mistrust with the British, they had found another convenient ally at that time. And on top of that, it was a cross section of their own community. So now the establishment of these clubs, and they were just not limited to Bharat. Okay, they were also established in London, Turkey, Cairo, and even Singapore. Okay, The members of these branches too were expected to give up their allegiance to their respective national governments. Okay, so these organizations like Anjuman, who were coming up across all across the world, okay, one of the pledges of those clubs was to renounce their loyalty towards their national government and pledge their loyalty to Turkey or the Caliphate. Okay, this is again simply concretizing the idea of two separate nations. Right, so this is what that was going on over there. So now it brought them together. After bringing them together, okay, the community, it transformed into a formidable opponent to both the pagans as well as the British. Okay, so the League's collaboration with Congress at the behest of the pan-Islamists to secure self-government for Bharat was strategic, because it would mean loosening the British government's hold over Muslims in Bharat. Like I said, okay, there was a mistrust. They did not trust them, so they needed a backup plan. Okay, all this while you can see that they had still not explicitly come out in the open and denounced their loyalty towards the British. Okay, they had simply just explored another option that was available, but they did not use it earlier because the British were the convenient ally at that time. Now, after the First World War, it had opened up some doors because, like I said, they needed a much more stronger ally back home. They could not depend on the British when it came to their rights, and what they did was simply just reorganizing the community that they had and politicizing them. All right, so both these fragments from the community, they came together and now they were a formidable force. There are also evidences of letters being written to and fro, communications between these societies and the Ottoman Caliphate. There are letters, documented evidences. They're available on the internet for you to see and download. So I would very much urge you, like I said, and like I've also said in many of my previous videos, you do not need to take my word for granted. Do your own due diligence, and if you can come up with a rebuttal, okay, we always keep our comment sections open. You can exercise your freedom of expression and disagree with anything that you might think that whatever I have said is is questionable. All right, so yes, those things are known as silk letters. There was back and forth written communication between these clubs, Anjuman, that goes by the name of Anjuman, in multiple countries, between the caliphs in Turkey and academic scholars over there, with these societies that came to be known by the name of Anjuman. Okay, now what you need to focus was the underlying idea. Why was it that that the British attacked Ottoman Caliphate? Was it simply for the reason of that the Muslims were successful in spreading Islam in the parts of Europe? Was that the only reason why the British and their allies such as France and Italy attacked all these countries? Okay, there is an argument to be made, and most of the scholars and historians agree on this argument, that the Ottoman Caliphate wasn't exactly benevolent to its minorities. There is one exception to this. Obviously, there is one exception to this that we'll discuss in the further parts of the video. But okay, it is a widespread knowledge that the Ottoman Caliphate wasn't exactly friendly with the minorities. There are well documented examples of the Greek and the Armenian genocide, conducted by the Ottoman rulers. So the argument of the Christians, okay, because the minorities in the Ottoman Caliphate were the Christians, okay, so the argument of the Christians that they attacked these countries to save the minorities, to save the non-Muslims, it does have some degree of truth to it, okay, because the other side completely believes that it was an unprovoked aggression. There was no need by the Christian countries of Italy, France, and Britain to attack the Muslim countries of Turkey and Libya and all the other countries. Okay, but when you focus on the side of the Christians, they said that the Ottomans, they weren't treating the minorities very well. Okay, so hence they had to attack. All right, so this was the reason why Christians, they, in a way, I would say, betrayed the people of their own book. Okay, but again, we being pagans, we had no skin in the game. These were just political maneuvers being done in some part of the world, but these maneuvers had repercussions, and almost always bad repercussions for the pagans. Okay, there were some good repercussions for Muslims because they were people of the book and they had this mutual alliance of convenience, but with the pagans, zero. All right, and on top of that, you will see that the moderates were making wholesale concessions. But our history textbooks will conveniently hide this because we don't know. Okay, that is an appeal to your own reason. You can reason out, rationalize with it within your brain. If you're not able to, just read some multiple sources of history and you'll know. Okay, so indeed these wars that forced, or these wars that resulted in the Christian takeover of these Muslim territories, they were the result of the clash of Christian uh, Christian coloniality and Islamic coloniality. So these wars that were taking place, they were the rule, or they were the culmination of competition between both the people of the book, both the major monotheistic traditions, and they were fighting. Okay. Now, since they were fighting, their colony, that is Bharat, was simply just a bystander. And I would not call them bystander because the soldiers that the British army was employing, majority of them were drawn from Bharat. Okay, and in that battalions, there were again many of the Muslim soldiers who were fighting, okay, the Ottoman Empire on behalf of the British. So you'll see it is a errors upon errors and lies upon lies. So this is something that our history textbooks will conveniently hide. All right. So yep, this is what happened. Okay. Interestingly, there was also something called as an Arab revolt. So if you think that Turkey was inevitably the center of Muslim power, there were also people in Turkey who resisted the Muslim power. There was something called Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire in June 1916. So if indeed it was the caliphate of Islam, why were exactly people revolting against it? Why were the Arabs revolting against it? Okay. It would be interesting to look into Muammar Gaddafi. Okay, he was somebody who advocated Arab and African nationalism, and he was, assassinated by USA for bringing, Arabs and Africans together. But that is again a discussion for some other video. Right now, we are going to focus on Turkey. Okay, there was also some revolt going on against the Ottoman Empire. So the entire argument that the fort of Islam was Turkey during that time, and there was complete agreement by the total and entire population of Turkey, that's a complete lie, because there was an Arab revolt in 1916 that took over, places of worship of Makkah, Jeddah, and all these places. Okay, now these places that were places of worship for Muslims that were now under the control of the Christians. Okay, and now after the peace treaty that was going to be signed, that is Paris Peace Treaty, they had come to think, or they had come to the conclusion that the British, they were not going to be benevolent. Okay, these places of worship that were the places of worship for Islam cannot pass into the hands of somebody who is non-Muslim. All right, so they wanted to make sure, and hence it drove them to the arms of the pagans, because they needed a political ally to cement their roots in Bharat and to, decouple or divorce their political life from their brothers of the book. Okay, so again, yes, that adds to that adds proof to the argument that indeed they were seeking alliance with the pagans, just as a fail safe, just in case the British choose to stab them in the back. Okay, and that was also revealed. Okay, if you allow me, there was wills, I'll not get into too much details, but this is an event that shapes or had repercussions for political history of Bharat. So we'll quickly touch upon it. There was a Bolshevik revolution in 1917 in Russia. Okay, we'll not get into the details, but there was a Bolshevik revolution in 1917 that forced Germany to sign secret treaties with Russia. Okay, earlier Germany was aligned with the Christians, that is towards the British, Italy, France, and all that. British, France, and Ottoman Caliphate, and all that. Okay, initially it was, but right after 1917, in the Bolshevik Revolution, Germany aligned with Russia. Okay, now after aligning with Russia, what did Germany do? Okay, they leaked the details of the secret treaties that the British had with Germany. Okay, now what happened was, in those secret treaties, the information that came out was that the places of worship that they had overtaken from the hands of the Muslims were going to be passed on to other Christian nations under the idea of spheres of influence. Okay, now this was a significant jolt to the Muslims, that how can the people of our book, the brothers, our Abrahamic brothers, betray us? Okay, now this is not as simple as it sounds, okay, but just to give you a primer, because what significant repercussions did it have on the political landscape of Bharat? This is just the, you know, uh, I would say just the surface or the tip of the iceberg. There are also many things going on, but just to give you a picture, just to give you a primer, okay, I would very much urge you again to do your own due diligence. It's not, these things are not as simple as they sound, but yes, there was a Bolshevik revolution, Germany signed a treaty with Russia, and Germany leaked the details of those secret treaties, and it came out that these places of worship of Islam that these Christian countries had overtaken were going to pass into their hands under the title of spheres of influence. This is where the origin of, again, the dispute that Palestine and Israel and Palestine have. Okay, right after this, okay, there were Balfour declarations. Okay, it was declared that the British are going to support the Jewish aspirations for their own separate nation. Okay, so this again adds another layer of mistrust. Why? Because if you are, if you are pretty much aware about the political developments in West Asia, you would know that Muslims and Jews aren't exactly the best of friends. Okay, at least in the neighborhood of Israel. They might be somewhere else, but at least in the neighborhood of Israel, they are not, pretty much on friendly terms. So again, this was also the time, 1917. This is also the time when they were promised a separate Jewish nation. This again miffed the Muslims. Why? Because the British were again supporting their enemies. This came again as a rude shock to them, but it is what it is. All right, so this again raised some sympathies amongst the moderates for the Muslim League, and by that extension Muslims. So now Gandhi, Mohandas Gandhi, he had arrived at the political scene. Okay, looking at all of this, okay, he wrote a letter in April 1918. Gandhi once again wrote a letter to the Viceroy, and this is an excerpt from that letter. Let's read what Gandhi had to say in the backdrop of all of this. Okay. Lastly, I would like to request His Majesty's ministers to give definite assurances about the Muslim states. I'm sure you know that every Muslim is deeply interested in them. As a Hindu, I cannot be indifferent to their cause. Their sorrows must be our sorrows, and the most scrupulous regard for the rights of the states and for the Muslim sentiments as to the places of worship, and in your just and timely treatment of Indian claim to home rule lies the safety of the empire. Okay, now there are a couple of things that you need to, focus on. Here he writes, I'm sure you know that every Muslim is deeply interested in them. As a Hindu, I cannot be indifferent to their cause. Why? What cause were, the Muslims were interested? What pagan cause were they interested during that time? None. We've already established this in our previous videos. Okay, this alliance between the moderates and the Muslims, pagans weren't getting anything out of it. Moderates were simply getting means to further their political ends. Muslims were getting the support of moderates to counter the British. what exactly was the majority of the populace of this country that were illiterate pagans at that time, what exactly were they getting? Nothing. Something for you to think about. Okay. So this is Gandhi who is writing this, and he's saying that he cannot stay indifferent. He simply has to consider the Muslim cause. Why? We don't know. But the answer is he wanted to, further his political image. He wanted to get votes or get the support of the Muslim community because he knew, okay, that this community was politically aware, politically active, and they could be convinced to vote for him, so he could occupy a position of power. Okay, now if you think that Gandhi was operating out of benevolence, you know then I would say you have appealed too much to your sense of ignorance, and now it is time for you to appeal to your sense of reason and direct that appeal of sense of reason to the betterment of the nation. All right, your spirituality can take a back seat for a while. I'm not saying to completely ignore your spirituality. Using your sense of reason to further your spirituality is okay, but now for a while let it take a back seat, and let the your sense of reason or faculty of reason be in the front seat, driving your sentiments of nationhood. All right. So this is what happened, because since he was, furthering his political gain. So, and this is again, yeah, it's that is what it is. So yes, now it had come the time for the Muslims to depend on the pagans, and this was again momentary. That would again we'll see in the future how the interests of the pagans were sacrificed at the altar of the demands of separate nationhood by the Muslims. Okay, that's all for this from this episode of Unlearning the Falsehoods. I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.